All right, y'all, the ritual has been completed. I have been summoned. And by ritual, of course, I mean a presidential election. So I will see y'all again in the next 4 years. Before we get into deep, I must complete the cracking of the seltzer, as is tradition. And now we may continue. So I was able to scrounge up a little bit of time to sit down and record this. And this is actually a theme or topic that I've been sitting on for the last like 4 months. But I think it'll be very applicable to the results of recent events. I was even trying to think ahead to like what would be a fun topic for Thanksgiving. And while there are other topics pertaining to fitness and overall mental health and well-being and wellness that would fit within Thanksgiving, at some point in this episode, I will be going into little things that you can do and, potentially talking to people you know or loved ones about their impact on the world and the consequences of their actions and how that makes you feel, or I guess just talking about your feelings with the people in your life in general. Hey, what better time than around a big old dead bird and some mashed taters? Am I right? So stay tuned for that. So, this was originally inspired by some old stuff that kind of happened in like the all right, the peripherals. I feel like that's not right. Peripherals. Is it per or is it per? We'll go with peripherals. Some stuff that happened kind of like in a niche within a niche of the fitness sphere over the summer. But again, I think it's pretty good timing with what's going on right now. I'm going to start with the tea from back in July, and I'm going to kind of weave it into present day and how it relates to current events and how you can apply it to your own life. So I'm not going to get too into detail here because this isn't like a drama channel. However, tea is in the title. So if you are just kind of curious of what I'm talking about, if I'm being too vague or if you just like don't know about the comings and goings of fitness influencers, then just shoot me a message and I will fill you in. As always, you can reach me via Instagram, or I just started a Discord server, which I'm going to have linked below. It's for anyone who is currently into fitness or is looking to get into fitness, looking to connect with like-minded individuals. And if you don't know anything about Discord, I'm going to get into it a little bit more later, but it's a little bit more exclusive. You can't just search it and join it. It's basically like maybe like a Facebook group with way more features, or I would also liken it to a way more modern, more social media minded, like Slack, if you've ever used Slack for work or for your group messaging. So if you wanted to drop a line there or post something in the Discord, just kind of like, hey, what were you talking about? I would be happy to answer there. So anyway, I have a personal belief and I have a lot of beliefs and opinions, hence why we're here. But one of those is that all tea can be compelling if you have context. So I'm going to give you some context and then I'm going to give you a little bit of background details. And again, I'm going to keep it all as vague as possible. But basically, some of y'all might be familiar with a popular influencer within the fitness community by the name of Goob_U2. He's gone through a couple of these accounts by now for what'll be obvious reasons. But if you don't know who he is, he does have like over 700,000 followers, but I never assume that anyone knows anyone anymore just based off of following, just because social media now has gotten so big. Now, he does experience more virality than other creators just by the nature of the content, But again, I'm going to give you a little bit of background if you don't know about him or the kind of content he makes. He mostly specializes in calling out people running scams, people using Photoshop, which is super important in fitness and wellness, and predators within the fitness space. So, obviously, very important work. I would say much needed work, especially for this day and age. I would highly recommend his page for anyone getting into fitness. Just a word of warning or just something to keep in mind going into his content and potentially a trigger warning. But one of the things I mentioned was that he specializes in calling out predatory behavior or predators within the space. It can kind of make it feel like, fitness is a breeding ground of people who are, again, have predatory nature. And unfortunately, they are everywhere. They walk among us. I don't want to scare anyone out of, or I don't want anyone to watch it and be concerned that this is a thing. Again, it's a problem everywhere, and we are very lucky to have somebody who is attacking it so aggressively. And the biggest thing with fitness is that a lot of the people who do come to gyms or hire a coach are in a vulnerable place, or maybe they feel vulnerable when they go to the gym and they might have a lot of insecurities. So it is super important to call out these people who are taking advantage of others because people in this space looking for help are so vulnerable. And before I go further, we're almost all the way through November, which is crazy, and December is going to fly, and then we're going to be in January. If you have a coach or you hire a coach or you're receiving guidance from anyone, I mean, even more in general, just always trust your gut. Like, if you are receiving guidance or advice or someone's process just doesn't feel right, go with that gut feeling. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with finding other professionals, either locally or online or even social media if you can. And chances are when you found your coach, you were shopping around. So there is nothing wrong with reaching out and just asking, hey, I have a coach already. However, there's a few things that they're having me do, or even you could even message me. You could go to Discord, not Discord. Well, I mean, yes, go to the Discord, but you could go to Reddit. Reddit's a really good resource because it is anonymous. So you could post in r/fitness, powerlifting, bodybuilding. And if you just make a post like, hey, my coach is having me do this and I don't feel right about it, they might need some more context. But again, if you don't want it kind of out in public, message someone privately. I think the worst case is they might feel like, oh, I don't really give advice via Instagram, or I don't do free consults or whatever. Worst case, you might get one or two of those, but by and large, most people would be happy to help you, especially if you're already a client and you're having doubts. And I mean, if it's the potential of, if your coach is really doing you wrong and it's potential for them to take on new business, then it's a win-win. You get out of a bad situation and now they have a new client. Most people would be happy, and the people that wouldn't, you wouldn't want to work with them anyway. So a really broad example of this, and I don't even know how popular this still is, but it used to be really common that coaches, especially ones that weren't qualified to be nutrition coaches, they used to prescribe clients like 1,200 calories a day. And like they give the advice of, if you're feeling a little hungry, just have a handful of almonds or have some leaves of lettuce and that'll fill you right up. And I would say there are very, very, very few situations where 1,200 calories a day would be necessary. However, there might be like a couple scenarios where it would be appropriate. Again, not necessary, but appropriate. even if you have something like PCOS and you're on 1,200 calories a day, you're starving, you feel terrible, your energy levels, whatever. So where you've expressed that, hey, I'm on 1,200 calories, I'm not losing weight or I'm losing weight, but I feel like garbage, and they're not changing the program for you or making adjustments or troubleshooting, then that's where you might need either just someone more qualified or more specialized help. Especially in my experience with registered dietitians and nutritionists on social media, they would be more than happy if you can connect with them. It could even be on LinkedIn or Facebook, but Instagram's really good. You message them, you say, hey, I know you might not do consults via Instagram or for free. However, I'm really struggling here. My coach has me XYZ. And I genuinely believe they would be more than happy to guide you or affirm any feelings that you're having or saying, or it could even be like, hey, okay, this does sound right for your condition, like this amount of calories or this amount of carbs. However, you are obviously not feeling good. I would go and see I would try to get more professional help, so like an RD, a nutritionist. I always worry when I give advice like that because I just imagine the person listening to this who's like, oh, I had an RD and they put me on 1,200 calories and they, whatever, and they had me on like five carbs a day and I felt terrible and I'll never go back. And so I think about that one person in the comments, and that's where I really start waffling. But I need to remember that, especially in my experience with RDs and nutritionists, it is so few and far between. And I would say just not common anymore. Maybe that was a thing a while ago when the profession was still kind of new or when we had limited data, but I think now they have to go through so much in order to get licensed and keep their license. I really don't see that being a problem. I think the biggest thing you'll run into now with like an RD or a nutritionist is just like not being professional or just bad bedside manner, but I think they all like know what they're doing. So anyway, whole tangent, basically just saying you are not cheating if you like go around and ask, hey, my coach is having me do this. And honestly, I know it sucks to have to get a new coach, but coaches, even nutritionists, I mean, if you want them covered by insurance, maybe not, but coaches these days, even powerlifting, like even specialized coaches, they're becoming like such a dime a dozen that if you don't like them, you just fire them. Now, if it's a matter of I don't like their approach, you'll want to like voice that and see how they respond. And you do want some kind of internal conversation of, do I not like the way that they're coaching, or am I just not willing to put in the work? Or am I not being honest with myself, my expectations of myself? Or are there other things going on that I'm not addressing? Or am I the problem? Am I the drama? Am I the problem? But yeah, if you don't like them, just fire them. Just find someone else. I know it's a whole thing to have to go and look for someone new and then acclimate and whatever. But even then, if you can give them more information up front of like, hey, I'm already coming from a coach. This is where I'm at. This is all the info that they asked. If you just forward over some of that information, maybe the numbers might change or a few things might need tweaked, but you can kind of expedite that process for yourself. And if you don't know where to start, just again, message me. I have the time until I start disassociating and forget to respond, but I will be as much of a resource as I possibly can be. But anyway, back to Goob, who his government name is John, so I might flip-flop between the two throughout this, but the biggest thing that sets him apart from any other page or person who has done this kind of stuff before or who might do it in the future is that he really does his due diligence. He fact checks everything and he makes sure that whatever evidence or receipts that he has, they are concrete. I believe he tries his best to work with victims or accusers to get to get their side of the story. And any evidence, any like visual evidence that he shows, it's very clear as to what is being said and what it is referring to. If it's a screenshot in a conversation, and it's very clear the context of the conversation, what they're talking about, what they're referring to. And, I think he tries to get everything as black and white as possible. And this not only makes him very credible, but it also protects him on a legal level. If you are showing something that is easy to prove or objective or concrete, or especially if it has legal backing to it, like if he's showing court documents from like a previous conviction, then there's nothing you can do about it. It is just the truth. Another thing I like too is when he calls out people doing Photoshop or scamming, he kind of talks about how to look out for signs of these things yourself. So he kind of tries to hand you some of the tools as well. And despite all of his due diligence, he still gets threatened with lawsuits on a pretty regular basis, which I'm sure you can imagine, most often for defamation or things like that, which is really hard to prove. By the way, there's a few elements that have to be present in order to prove defamation, and a lot of people don't realize that. I'm sure some of them who consider it, they kind of start the process and then figure out that they don't really have any kind of leg to stand on. And then he has actually been sued 2 or 3 times, and I don't know the status of all of them, but I know at least one of them, it was settled out of court. And usually, especially in smaller suits, usually what that means is that both parties or all parties have realized that it's going to be a lot more money, resources, time, work than it's worth to actually come to the result that either party wants. On the defendant's end, and this would have been John and one other party in the instance I'm thinking of, if you settle out of court, I almost never consider it as a loss on the defendant's end. Not even the plaintiff either, but if I had to declare a winner or a loser, I would say that's mostly a loss on the plaintiff's end, because you really thought you had something there and you just didn't. At least not something as concrete as you thought. So in the beginning of the episode, I said that this topic was inspired by events that occurred over the summer. So I'm going to give you, this time I promise, I'm going to give you the super, super cliff notes of what happened. Basically, he was accused of not covering a story about one of his friends in order to protect them. And I don't even know how friendly they actually were, but essentially, John's reason was because the evidence wasn't thorough enough. It wasn't to his standards. And I believe he also hadn't personally spoken with any of the victims who had come forward. And by come forward, I mean, I don't even think they really went public with anything. It's really, they just told their story to someone else. So it was kind of like a game of telephone. And I believe normally he likes to talk directly to the victims. So in summary, at the time, I could see both sides from what limited knowledge we have. So first of all, I believe all victims, so write that down. But also, the evidence given was enough for me personally. So not only do I believe victims, and I want to emphasize that while I do believe victims, I am open to hearing all sides, right? I won't expand on that, but if you're curious why, let me know. But when victims come forward or when they share their stories, I am inclined to believe them. And like I said, the evidence that was displayed was enough for me. I'm like, sure, yeah, why not? And then there was an outpouring of similar experiences from others that had nothing to gain from corroborating these stories. They were just like, oh yeah, he pulled that with me, sure. However, I could also see where the evidence that was brought forward wouldn't be up to John's standards, especially considering he probably gets dozens and possibly hundreds of suggestions every day of stories to cover. So I understand where he has to be protective of his brand and what he does, because there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who trust him to do the right thing, right? So, but worst case scenario, he chose not to expose his acquaintance or friend, which is still not great. Best case in my mind, this was a story very much worth at least looking into, that he was being accused of just kind of brushing off, which is still not great. So I have a few takeaways from this. Number one, I say this a lot, and this won't be the last time, but everyone has a line. I have a line. I believe that when it comes to standing up for your values, most people either take the offensive or the defensive. My place is the defense. I aim to create a safe place that is welcoming and inclusive, but I personally have limited stamina and bandwidth to be constantly on the forefront. And the defense has become a really good sweet spot where my values and my personal capabilities intersect. The other thing, the second thing to remember, is that all people are flawed. I know that this is common sense, but I think we forget this sometimes. And this isn't said to just kind of discount any wrongdoing, but oftentimes we hold people, especially people we don't know that much about, in really high regard because we see the things that they do. However, I believe that you almost never truly know someone, like really truly. I think unless you live with them, and even then, there are certain people and situations where you still don't know fully what is in that person's heart, what's in that person's mind, and what they do with their time 24/7. So when things like this happen, it is on you to ask yourself what you are willing to tolerate. It gets to a certain point where you're not willing to tolerate something. Ask yourself if there's anything you can do to make a difference. I constantly stop watching or listening to creators whenever they do something that doesn't align with me personally. In the situation I mentioned previously, the guy eventually ended up making his own post about everything, and it got a lot of traction. The post ended up getting well over 10 times the views of his normal content. Could you imagine if just calling out bad behavior became normalized? Not like to the point where people are calling out each other for, like, I don't know, loitering or like silly stuff. But if someone's being crazy to you in the DMs, you should be able to put them on blast without worrying about repercussions. Like, no matter the size of the account or no matter their prominence in a certain organization or community, you should be able to just like put the screenshot on your story or on the timeline, tag them and say, hey, y'all, this guy is crazy. And again, you don't even have to put it like as a main post. Just like you put it on your story, it'll catch. Or if you're willing to kind of deal with comments or whatever, even disable the comments, who cares? And just put it on main. Now, I know that could mess up, if someone's going to the profile and you're going for a certain aesthetic. Screenshots, text posts, they don't make for the best aesthetic. But if you don't care about that, I think that's awesome. Because what is even the goal here, right? It's usually one, let the person know that they need to stop what they are doing, like yesterday, and also maybe inform others, hey, this person is doing this thing. It's wrong if you also do this, because hopefully, the story gets picked up. It gets picked up by the algorithm. People see it and it gets outside of your sphere, right? It sets an example for others. It lets the person know, hey, you need to cut this out. But then also, thirdly, hopefully the person pays some kind of retribution and or they atone for what they did. So what does that look like? Usually deplatforming, a loss of income or reputation, a flogging in the town square that is social media, really anything. So atoning would be taking accountability, potentially apologizing publicly or privately and making it right in some form or fashion. So in this case, from my understanding, the guy with the accusations was fully made aware he was wrong and he took some kind of accountability. And it is unfortunate that we'll never know for sure if he did what it was and like to what degree. But I think at the very least, what could be done to expose him was definitely enough to give him some kind of wake-up call, right? So zooming out, the broader view, I think when it comes to people who have some perceived level of power, whether that's like influence or a large platform or money, especially when they're relatively accessible, we want them to just kind of fix everything for us, which ties us into present day with politicians. Hear me out. We want them to fix or at least make them better. And when the person that we want to be in charge is in charge, or the group that we want in charge is in the seat of power, things feel better. But we should never become complacent. A lot of my friends and mutuals were really upset at the election results, which is totally understandable. I even said in an Instagram post after the election that Democrats let the American people down several times in the past few years. And honestly, looking back, there's a lot more Obama's administration could have gotten done. And the fact of the matter is, you can't keep constantly letting down the people who trust you and expect them to keep trusting you. That's exactly what happened this election. They became complacent. They abandoned the very people that were counting on them. That is why so many people who were undecided didn't even go vote. So even if Harris would have won, there's still parts of the country where people feel persecuted, and that probably wouldn't have changed, even with her, like, in the presidential seat. This whole election cycle, I've been saying, start small, and it starts with you. So I asked myself, what can we do? And I watched a lot of small organizations and nonprofits rally together and say, hey, we're going to keep fighting for you. And I've just been thinking about how much it would help if there was a place people could go to just be themselves and take a break from everything. So I took it upon myself to create a Discord community for that reason. So like I said earlier, my hope is that if you're already into fitness or if you want to get into it, this is a space where you can get support, where you can uplift others if you have experience, and where you can connect with others through fitness and other interests. So maybe this is your common interest, but then you have other hobbies or other interests outside of that, or maybe you want to get into something. And this is a great place to go to connect. I'll have it linked below and I'll talk more about it another time. But I just finished it and I'm really excited about it and I wanted to make y'all aware. But one other kind of little mini rant I wanted to go into in this episode, and one piece of advice I wanted to leave with y'all. I have such imposter syndrome when it comes to giving advice, especially on the internet. However, I feel so strongly in this conviction that I'm going to share it with y'all. And some of you don't need this piece of advice, but some of you do, or some of you might know someone who does. But it is to stop putting people on pedestals. Like I said, I do not put anything past anyone. We hold these influencers, celebrities, politicians in such high regard, and we have all these expectations of them. And yes, you should have expectations of politicians. Maybe that's the exception because they're literally supposed to represent you and what you want, but we put so much expectations and we hold celebrities and influencers in such high regard. However, we will never truly know what they are like behind closed doors, what they do, not in the public eye. And we will never truly know where their heart is. And I can tell you, in the case of politicians, most of them are just out for their own gain and or their own agenda. I can count, I think, on two hands, and maybe not even two, the amount of politicians that I know of who are actually in it because they care. And actually, you know what? I do think there's a lot of politicians, like on a local level in the current day, who do genuinely care. But when we get higher up, that's where I can count on like one hand the amount of politicians who actually care about us and what we want and actually want to do what it'll take to get there. And that includes your fave, that includes politicians on the left, that includes everyone. So when it comes to fan behavior over politicians, it is so goofy. It's Mickey Mouse. It's Looney Tunes. You look silly. Like these people do not care about you. But you should have high expectations for politicians, right? We literally choose them to represent us, right? And in the case of this election and in politics in general, I saw a lot of posts after the election just being like women, I'm so sorry, or America let down women tonight. And I need y'all to understand that half, if not over half, of Trump's voters were women. Like the call is coming from inside the house. And I need you to understand that. You probably, statistically speaking, you probably have somebody in your life, either directly or indirectly, who voted for Trump. There's a really good chance a woman very important to you or close to you voted for Trump. And I 100% understand y'all, us, younger millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. I understand we are not confrontational. A lot of us are not confrontational, and I get that. And you need to protect your energy. However, it doesn't have to be a huge confrontation, but it can be as simple as just being like, hey, so you voted for Trump. Just ask why. I think people have really devalued or underestimated the power of just asking why and what kind of conversation that can create. And at the very least, at least you can understand where these people are coming from, and maybe you could even like tailor your arguments or your conversation to like kind of hit on their concerns. But it can really be as easy as just asking why and just saying, hey, I hear your concerns. I acknowledge them. I just want to let you know that really disappoints me. Not you disappointed me. I mean, you say whatever you want, but just say that really disappoints me. And you consider yourself someone who supports women or supports me. If I were in this situation where I needed life-saving health care, what would you do? What would you want me to do? Genuinely. And that's a huge thing too, is like, we have such an empathy deficiency in this country right now. I think the next 4 years are going to suck for that. People are just so, and you know, it's not 100% political. A lot of it, I think, is just social media. And a lot of it is just the very foundations of this country. It's a very individualistic, very the American dream, and everyone has a voice. We all feel like our opinions matter. Our opinions are right. And then you add social media to it, where it's just one big echo chamber a lot of the time. And you have a recipe for so many people running around misinformed who are just blatantly wrong and just feel so confident in their wrongness, their incorrectness. And it's hard. And again, you have to protect your energy. If you would rather just like post vaguely on social media about how disappointed you are with the people in your life than actually just talk to them, that is 100% your choice. And you have to do what you feel comfortable doing. I'm just saying, I think the same amount of energy would be better spent like directed to the people in your life. Because again, and I'm going to say it again in this episode, start small. It starts with you. But anyway, we also hold these influencers, especially like people on TikTok or like streamers where they're so accessible. We hold them to such a high regard because we think we know them or their values, and you just don't. And to also have expectations for them and to try to apply your own personal moral standings to them is just wild. And like I said, I don't put anything past anyone. And I tried to find little truths and little nuggets and everything. So you might hear this and roll your eyes, but there is a really good Daniel Tosh bit during one of his stand-up specials where he says it cracks him up when you go on the news and someone is talking about how someone that they knew like murdered, like committed murder. And they're like, they always lit up a room. They were like such a good person, whatever. And he jokes that he could find out that his mom blew up an orphanage or a children's hospital or something. And he was like, you will find me on the news. Like, you know what? I could kind of see it. Sometimes I'd come home from school and she didn't seem that happy to see me. And his delivery is obviously way better because he actually rehearsed and memorized it. But I'm like, yeah, dude. Now, I'm not saying, your parents are capable of murder or whatever, but I'm just saying it's very rare to actually know someone and what happens and like what actually happens in their hearts and in their minds, right? But what this does is it frees you of a lot of emotional attachment to these people, and it protects you from potential disappointment. I just refer to it as appreciating from a distance. And again, this doesn't magically free these people of like holding accountability for misactions or wrong actions. But for people like Goob, who does good work, but I have no idea what he's like in real life, I acknowledge the person, but it's the work that I'm a fan of. So I say acknowledge the person because you should still hold these people accountable if they act up. So I acknowledge him, but I'm a fan of his work. So it's like if a YouTuber you watch or an artist you listen to, if your follow or engagement or streams or listens supports that person directly or indirectly, and they've done something outside of your values, they shouldn't get that support anymore. Like, do you know how many people I've had to stop listening to because I think that they just suck? But people will be like, I have to listen to Kanye. He's a genius. Or, no, you have to understand, Mel Gibson is a really good actor. And again, there's kind of an offensive way that you can kind of hold somebody accountable, and there's a defensive way. A defensive way is like removing your support, boycotting something, where an offensive might be to spread awareness or try to comment on their stuff and try to hold them accountable, or again, just like put that person on blast, So again, figure out what you're willing to tolerate, and then figure out what you are willing to do to kind of counteract that negative action or the negative feelings caused by that person. But one of my lines personally is, and I touched on it earlier, is to just, like, I just don't put my personal morals and my values on anyone but me. Now, again, there is a line where there's always a line. Whose line is it anyway? But there's always a point where it's your personal morals and values and where it's just general ethics, right? Where it's like, it is black and white. Okay, but where it's gray, that is where you have that internal dialogue of like, okay, what am I willing to tolerate? And what am I willing to do to make this right or counter it? Or just feel like I have the ability, the power to make change. So that's the bulk of what I wanted to talk about, y'all. Remember, too, at the end of the day, people are just flawed. And one thing I like to try to keep in mind, especially when it comes to spreading awareness of like social issues or even the people in my life who hold different values than I do or who hold beliefs that I disagree with, is that every single person has had their own unique experiences. They have their own unique perspective, and they are a product of the environments which they grew up in. Every situation and every place and every person who has formed your personal beliefs, your value system, every single individual person on this planet has had their own version of that, right? Again, there is cut and dry right and wrong, right? But from the areas that are like gray or areas where your culture might greatly impact what you consider to be right and wrong, or what you consider to be like kind of a toss up, like it depends, or what you consider to be rude or not socially acceptable, it's going to be different in different cultures. There are situations where something is just right and wrong, but where I see people, I don't see someone with differing beliefs than me. I see someone who had their own upbringing and who has had like 20, 30, 40, 50 years of time on this earth where their own perspective has been molded and shaped by the circumstances which they grew up in and which they live in. So I do believe that it doesn't change that some of these people are wrong. You could see where I can be a little bit more patient, right? However, as I've gotten older, I do not have the patience to constantly go out and tell these people that they're wrong and educate them why. And for me, where I am coming from a place of compassion and I just genuinely want what's best for everyone, it is not on me to educate you why you should feel that way, why you should want what's best for everyone too. I can't tell you why you should care. But there are people out there who will, and I will support them. I will give them my views. I will give them my likes. I will donate. I will spread their word. And there's enough people out there doing that work to where I can just be over here. Like, if you're looking for a place to go, like you found it. So it's a classic. The more things change, the more they stay the same. You have to be the change you want to see. When did Gandhi spit those bars? Be the well, y'all, they tried to cancel Gandhi. Do you remember this? I think the Mother Teresa too, unless I'm just making this up, unless I just saw like satire from like the Onion or something. Which, by the way, the Onion being the change they wish to see, buying InfoWars, huge W. When did Gandhi spit these bars? 1913. So over 100 years later, and it is still true. So there you have it. Keep people accountable where you can, and also do what you can to create the change that you want to see, or at least create a light spot where you see darkness. Because in the end, it all starts with you. Y'all take care. Please reach out if you need anything. And most importantly, please stay safe. Goodbye.